the subject of SDG goals has been dealt in detail by Shri A.K. Jain. There are 17 SDGs, out of which apparently only 4 connected to the environment. These are the goal numbers 6, 13, 14 and 15. But if you go into depth, almost all the SDGs are connected with the environment. And particularly 3, 6, 7, 9, 12, 13, 14 and 15. That's 9 out of 17 sustainable development goals are having some linkage or the other with the environment. And in this connection, all the institutions which are involved in higher education, they can play a very, very important role in bringing an awareness about these goals to their students and also public in general. So these are the 9 SDGs which are having linkages with the environment. Now, talking about the environmental sustainability, our understanding in general is that meeting the resource and services needs of the current and future generations. The emphasis is also not only on the current generation but future generation without compromising the health of the ecosystems that provide these services. So this is the broad understanding of the environmental sustainability. This has been worked upon by a team led by Dr. John Morelli of the Rochester Institute of Technology. He and his team, they have proposed this elaborate definition of the environmental sustainability. It says that a condition of balance, resilience, and interconnectedness that allows human society to satisfy its needs while neither exceeding the capacity of its supporting ecosystem to continue to regenerate the services necessary to meet those needs, nor by our actions diminishing biological diversity. So, the needs of the human society, the present as well as the future generation, shall be met in such a manner that we don't cause any damage to the ecosystems. And the major component of the ecosystem is the biological diversity. The importance of biodiversity can be gauged by this fact that the World Environment Day 2020, which we celebrated merely 5 days ago, the focus is on the biodiversity. The theme of the current year's World Environment Day was Celebrate Biodiversity. I say it's not only celebration, but also conserve biodiversity. Conservation is much more important in these days. Unless biodiversity is conserved, preserved, protected, nurtured by the human beings, there will be no biodiversity left for celebration. So celebration is only with conservation. To understand the importance of environment and biodiversity, Eugene P. Odom has given a wonderful definition of the ecosystems, that any unit that includes all the organisms, that is the community or biotic component of the ecosystem in a given area interacting with the physical environment so that a flow of energy leads to a clearly defined trophic structure, biotic diversity, and material cycles. That's exchange of materials between living and non-living parts. Within the system is an ecological system or ecosystem. So, 2 things need to be understood here, that unless there is flow of energy and cycling of nutrients, any system devoid of any of these 2 factors cannot be termed as an ecosystem. So ecosystems could be a forest ecosystem, it could be crop ecosystem, it could be freshwater ecosystem, it could be marine water ecosystem, and so on and so forth. All the ecosystems will be consisting of these 6 ingredients, that is inorganic substances, organic compounds like proteins, fats, everything, climate regime, temperatures, rainfall, then the producers of the organic, either plants and animals, whether they are microorganisms or macro plants and animals, which produce the food, which photosynthesize and provide food to everybody else. Then macro consumers, which includes human beings also, the tigers, panthers, elephants, or whales, all this, they fall in the category of the macro consumers. They consume on they survive on the producers. And micro consumers, the bacteria and fungi, which may be available in the air or water or soil, and they basically decompose the organic matter to facilitate recycling of the nutrients. So this is a picture which depicts a typical ecosystem where you find that from the solar energy, the leaves of the plants, whether they are trees or bushes or herbs or animals, they synthesize the food by consuming carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. And when these plants die, they are decomposed with the help of bacteria and fungi, and the nutrients go back into the soil. They also help in the recharge of the groundwater. They support large number of plants and animals. So zooplankton, phytoplankton, bacteria, fungi, insects, larvae, and bigger and small animals. So all this put together composes an ecosystem. This is the same, another depiction of the ecosystem. The ecosystems, they safeguard lives and livelihoods in many ways. Coastal defense, they service, flood regulation, water purification, fisheries, livelihood provision, water conveyance and navigation, cultural services, carbon sequestration, coastal defense, water provision and water service, and many more services. We'll discuss about these things later on. But unless there is a sound ecosystem which is nurtured, preserved, all these services will not be available. Now we'll discuss about some of the problems which we are facing, which compose or comprises the climate change. We often hear about the global warming. We often hear about the greenhouse gases. What do they do? Why are we so much concerned about the climate change, global warming, emission of the greenhouse gases? We have got a protective layer around the Earth, roughly 30 to 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and it is comprising of the ozone gas. The oxygen and ozone, they keep on changing. But this is a protective shield against the ultraviolet rays which are coming from the sun. So it is not allowed to reach the Earth's surface, and thereby the Earth's temperature is maintained. For last many centuries or millions of years, the Earth's temperature has not gone up beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. But now the scientists say that it may go to 2 degrees. So even if there is a rise of half a degree temperature on the Earth's surface, what is going to happen? We will be feeling extremely hot weather. 14% of the global population will be exposed to severe heat at least once every year. And if temperature goes to 2 degrees, it will be 37%. That means 2.6 times situation will be worsening. Like sea ice free Arctic. At least every 100 years, the temperature is 1.5 degrees. If it goes to 2 degrees, it will happen in 10 years, once in 10 years. So that means 10 times situation is going to be worsened. Sea levels will rise. In last so many years, with temperature at 1.5 degrees, there was a rise of only 40 centimeters. But it will go up to 46 centimeters. And with this rise, many of the coastal cities will be flooded. They will be submerged. So that's the problem. I hope that most of you must have seen the film of Al Gore, The Inconvenient Truth. So these details you can find. How many cities, which city in which country is going to be submerged. Like coral reefs, there will be reduction, decline in the coral reef. Coral reef are the food for the fish and all the marine life. If their quantity declines, so there will be not much food left for the marine life, and majority of the people in the world are dependent on the marine products. So if temperature goes by half a degree more, 99% of the coral reef will be declined. So that's 29% worsening situation. Fisheries in marine fisheries, 1.5 million tons will go up to, decline will be up to 3 million tons. That is, it will be, rate of decline will be doubling. So this is the impact of increase in the temperature. This we can also extrapolate, say there are studies, there are many more factors. There will be melting of the snow caps. This will lead to many other problems, flooding in the plains, all types of things will happen. Another problem which we feel on the environmental front is the bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation, that means we are polluting the, say suppose, the oceans. We release a lot of, say, pollutants. Pollutants per se, like DDT, it may look minuscule to us, but when small planktons consume it, then it goes small particles, small quantity into their cells. And when they are consumed by the small fishes are eaten by the bigger fishes by otters, and say polar bear likes. With every stage, with the passage of energy, there is more and more accumulation of these pollutants, which will lead to that. And that's how many of these species are becoming extinct, only because of the actions, wrong actions of the human beings. Another example you can see of DDT only, say when it say fishes are eaten by birds, already the quantity of, so you can see per parts per million, it is going up from 5,000 to 25 to 5,000 in the case of birds, and that leads to that. So it's a bioaccumulation and biomagnification. With every stage in the food web, when we start from the microorganisms and go to the bigger animals, there is more accumulation of the pollutants leading to their death. Another example we can take of diclofenac. It's a medicine used for the, say, pain, giving relief from pain to the human beings. But much larger, though it has been banned in 2006, many of the places, the veterinary doctors, they were administering these medicine to the cattle. When the cattle died, it was found that there was huge amount of this particular medicine in their carcasses. When these carcasses were eaten by the eagle, they died, vultures. The vultures died. And only when we started finding, especially in India and globally also, why there is a huge decline in the population of the vultures, then it was traced to the diclofenac. And then it was banned. And now efforts are being made to revive the population of the vultures. Special efforts are being made because we cannot afford to lose any species. Because all species play a very, very important role in the maintenance of ecological balance. And that particular function is known as ecological niche. Ecological niche of each and every species is distinct, unique. No species can take over the role of another species. So, unknowingly, if we make any species to go extinct, we don't know how much damage we are causing to the ecosystem, and ultimately we ourselves may be getting harmed in the process. There are a number of examples how many species we have lost in the last, say, 50 years. It is estimated even today also that we are losing 1.5 million species. Ecosystems, species, wild populations, local varieties and breeds of domesticated plants and animals are shrinking, deteriorating or vanishing. the essential interconnected web of life on Earth is getting smaller and smaller and increasingly frayed. Environment, this loss is a direct result of human activity and constitute a direct threat to the human well-being in all regions of the world. According to another recent study, biological diversity loss has crossed the safe threshold in most of the world, leaving many ecosystems in the danger of collapse. I'll say the example from China will be very, very interesting. In 1958, there was a wave of killing of sparrows in the country. School children were taught how to shoot the sparrows. They used rifles, farmers used traps, people used poison bats, and also beating of the drums to prevent sparrows from landing on the ground, forcing them to die of exhaustion. The reason was the then President Mao Zedong, in his very famous or infamous Great Leap Forward, decided that farming will be state activity. And though he was neither an ornithologist nor ecologist or environmentalist, declared 4 species as pests: rats, mosquitoes, ants, and sparrows. The first 3 species were believed to be responsible for spreading malaria, typhoid, and plague. And sparrows, next, causing direct harm to the crops by eating their grains. The study says that a sparrow consumes only 4.5 kg of grains over a year, not in 1 day or 2 days. But it became an apple of discord. It was declared as public animal of capitalism. And that's why orders were issued that you shoot the sparrows, let them die. So, with this, there was almost extinction of this deliberate extinction of the sparrows in the entire country of China. This led to famine. They were worried how it has happened, because sparrows not only eat grains but also crop eating insects and vermin. So in the absence of sparrows, so these insects number increased and they swooped on the crop, especially the locust, and destroyed thousands of acres of crop. It was abated by large amount of pesticides, misuse of poison, and widespread deforestation. Result: loss of population of 76 billion during the Great Leap Forward. This campaign was withdrawn under the guidance of an ornithologist by the name So Hen Cheng. But China had not learned from this experiment. They changed the campaign of destroying the sparrows to destroying the bad bugs, and to rehabilitate or bring back, in order to restore the nature, they tried to and imported large number of sparrows from the Soviet Union. But it's difficult to restore in a short period of time. The Chinese tried to conquer the nature but could not. But this tragedy, unfortunately, is a taboo in China. Nobody talks about it, nor did China learn any lesson. They started another campaign in 2004 to eliminate civet cats and cull down more than 10,000 cats, with the belief that this will control SARS virus disease. Subsequently, they started another patriotic extermination campaign to target the badgers, raccoon dogs, rats, and cockroaches. Again, under the belief that with this, rabies will be put under control. But this didn't happen. What lesson we can learn from this or these incidents? Likewise, many such stories have happened throughout the world. It's difficult to enumerate them now, but what I can say is that there are many forms of life and human knowledge is limited. We hardly know about 10 to 12% of the life forms. We are still unaware of the, we can say 88% of the life forms. So how they are contributing to the maintenance of the ecological balance? What is their function? And what if any of this species goes away? Because these are from microscopic plants and animals to the mammoth-sized plants and animals. We are losing species by way of poaching as well as because of pollution. We are polluting air, we are polluting water, we are polluting soil, everything. But the number one enemy of the biodiversity is the habitat loss. So what is this habitat? I can say habitat is their house where they live, but we are encroaching upon their habitat. It's getting fragmented. The corridors are being lost. Even the sanctuaries and national parks are not honored. The rate of loss is unprecedented and rapidly rising. Around 1 billion species of plants and animals are threatened from extinction now. Biodiversity loss has crossed the safe threshold. Most of the ecosystems are on the verge of collapse. A report in the journals Science says that 58% of the Earth's land surface, which is home to 71% of the all human beings, has lost enough biodiversity. So is biodiversity that important? Can technology keep civilization running regardless of what happens to wildlife in the dwindling forest, grasslands, or wetlands? The answer is clear no. It's in our own interest to preserve whatever is left. Why biodiversity is important? There are 5 reasons. First one is, and foremost, is the food. 75% of the food supply comes from 12 plant species. More than 90% of the livestock population comes from just 15 mammals and birds. The wide range of wildlife makes agriculture possible. Bats, bees, birds, dragonflies, frogs, ladybugs, mantises, moles, nematodes, spiders, toads, wasps, etc. They help in pollination, eating of pests, and producing manure. In the history of mankind, 7,000 species of plants have been cultivated so far. But now we have come down to 12 major species of the plant, which provide food to the human beings. But there are many more species available. Think of a scenario if these 12 plant species, which are grown now as monoculture, are affected with some disease, then the entire species will be wiped out and there will be shortage of food. That's why biodiversity is important. Biodiversity, that means the plants which are available in the wild and wild varieties of these food supplying plants, they serve as gene pools. And you cannot price it. It's priceless. Monocultures may be wiped out due to drought or disease. But then these wild species, we always can fall back and bring back the species again. Biodiversity is intricately linked to the human health and also the health of all other forms of life in many ways. Higher biodiversity has been linked to lower instances of diseases. The people who are living in or around the forests are found to be healthier because they are inhaling pure oxygen. The sky is clear. They are getting fresh fruits, edible items from the forest. Likewise, people in the towns also or cities who live in the in or around green areas or surrounded by the greenery, they are supposed to live longer and healthier. So, loss of biodiversity, every time a species goes extinct, we never know what it could have provided to us. A drug for life-threatening disease or vaccine to cure diseases like cancer or even COVID-19. Ecosystem services, we get clean air, clean water, healthy soil, and raw materials for various industrial products. It provides resilience. Resilience, that means it provides insurance. Insurance against what? ensures ecosystem against decline in their functioning because many species provide greater guarantees that some will maintain functioning even if others fail. And ethics, aesthetics, and awe. No doubt, biodiversity is bigger than any one species, including Homo sapiens. When there thousands or millions of species are available, and we, as I told you, we know only about 10 to 12% of the species, and many species are becoming extinct. We don't know what we are losing. So, even if human beings, Homo sapiens species goes away, it is not going to adversely affect the nature. Beauty, it provides beauty. The many parks that once you go to a forest area for a picnic or spend a day there in a resort, you feel that you are more creative, your memory increases, and faster healing. In Japan, people have say the forest department has started say forest healing or forest therapy. People who are suffering from many diseases, they spend a week or 10 days or 15 days in the forest and they come back fully healed. Water crisis, I think so, a lot of articles have come, a lot of data is available in our country. This picture depicts that in desert areas where water is scarce, how precious it is, and for getting even one pot of water, how much of effort has to be made, and even then it's not available. This talks about this, about how much care we are taking about the nature. Survey says that globally, over 1/3 or 30% of edible food produced per annum is wasted. On the one hand, we find that in certain pockets there is scarcity of the food and we are wasting 30% of the food. This food wastage causes about 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. 3 kilograms of wasted food cause about 23 kgs of carbon dioxide to be emitted into the atmosphere. Studies also find that fashion industry produces about 10% of the carbon emissions annually. This is only rising. As people bought 60% more garments in 2014-15 than in 2000, but retained these for half as long. So we are unnecessarily purchasing the things. We are not, say, responsible consumers. Yet fast fashion is deeply damaging our nature. It takes about 7,500 liters of water to make one pair of jeans, which is equal to the amount of water one human being consumes over 7 years. So see the colossal waste. Despite this, 85% of all textiles are simply thrown away each year. One garbage truck full of clothes is thrown into a landfill each second. Imagine how much waste we are creating and how much of carbon dioxide is being emitted because of our, say, carelessness. Study also finds that 35% of microplastics, the tiny particles which never biodegrade, found in the Earth's oceans come from synthetic textiles like polyesters, which are commonly used in the fast fashion. And microplastics cause 31% of the plastic pollution in the water. So this is how much. So if we can cut down all these things, we can reduce the pollution of the water, we can reduce carbon emissions. Now, in this era of COVID-19, what are the challenges we are facing? We are facing the problems of climate change, food security, water security, human health, socio-economic development, disaster risk reduction, ecosystem degradation, and biodiversity loss. So, how do we overcome these challenges? We have to rethink, we have to refuse certain things, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle, and rot. Professor John Miller has given 15, the entire team of Rochester Institute of Technology has come out with wonderful 15 guiding principles to ensure that environmental stability is maintained. They have divided these 15 principles into 5 groups. First is the societal needs. Produce nothing that will require future generations to maintain vigilance. That means we should take care of the future generations also. We should not consume all what is available, whether they are renewable or non-renewable. Design and deliver products and services that contribute to a more sustainable economy. So this takes care of not only the human beings but also the industries. They should come up with certain designs and also deliver products and services which will contribute to the more sustainable economy. It should support the local employment. Otherwise, we are seeing people are coming from villages and coming to the bigger cities, and now in this period of pandemic, there is reverse migration. They are going back and in the process getting infected, and many of the people have died also. It's a very, very sad story. It should support fair trade, not unfair trade. That's why there is need to review the environmental attributes of raw materials and make environmental sustainability a key requirement in the selection of ingredients for new products and services. Preservation of biodiversity. Select raw materials that maintain biodiversity of natural resources. Use environmentally responsible and sustainable energy sources and invest in improving energy efficiency. As Mr. Jain has told that we have to move away from the use of fossil fuels and tap the renewable sources of energy. And solar energy can provide the best solutions in this regard, and we can do away with the use of coal or petroleum products. Then regenerative capacity. Keep harvest rates of renewable resources inputs within the regenerative capacity of the natural system that generates STEP. This we can understand from a simple example that if we put say 100 rupees in a bank and the rate of interest is 10%, so at the end of 1 year we'll be getting 10 rupees 10 as interest. Same thing is applicable to the natural resources. Whatever incremental growth is accumulated in a year, if we tap that much only, keeping the original resource intact, then it is called within the regenerative capacity. So this principle has to be to all the agencies which are involved in monitoring this harvesting, which as on today is destructive, which we are eating into the capital, that has to be stopped. Keep depletion rates of non-renewable resources inputs below the rate at which renewable substitutes are developed. So unless you develop substitute, don't go on using the non-renewable resources. The fourth is reuse and recycle. Design for reusability and recyclability. Design or redesign manufacturing and business processes as closed loop systems, reducing emissions and waste to zero. Very, very desirable, very difficult. We have been saying in our country, we have seen even the cement factories, they have been said that you put precipitator before you release the smoke into the air, so that all this participate matter is retained. It is not released into the air. But because of heavy cost, many of the people have not done it in the past. Only with great persuasion, with penal clauses, they have come to terms and they have started using. Likewise, all the industries which release their discharge into the streams or rivers, they have been said that it must be treated. Without treating, you don't release the discharge into the streams or rivers. They were not doing it. As a result, all our streams and all our rivers, including the mighty Ganges, was highly polluted. And now we have seen in the period of and this pandemic of COVID, Ganga had become very, very clean within 50 days because there was no discharge in the rivers. There was no pollution, and the scientists have conducted studies and found out that now the river, this water in the river Ganga at Har Ki Pauri, Haridwar was potable. So this kind of thing has happened. The Himalayas could be seen from as far as Jalandhar, which was not available earlier, which nobody could see in the last 100 years. So this is the impact of reducing or redesigning and bringing waste to zero. So this was because nothing was happening. But if everything is going on, even then the emission is zero or brought to minimum, that is what is desirable. Then constraints of non-renewable resources and waste regeneration. This scale, that is population into consumption per capita into technology. The scale of human economic subsystem should be limited to a level that, if not optimal, is at least within the carrying capacity and therefore sustainable. If the scale is more than the carrying capacity, naturally the non-renewable resources will be depleting. Keep waste emissions within the assimilative capacity of receiving ecosystems without unacceptable degradation of its future waste absorptive capacity or other important ecological services. Develop transportation criteria that prioritize low impact transportation models and approach all product development and product management decisions with full consideration of the environmental impacts of the product throughout its life cycle, not for a short period of 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. So these are the 15 prescriptions, and if all countries accept these and really put it into practice, then we can ensure the stability of the environment, not otherwise. What is good of having a nice house without a decent planet to put it on? We can't construct, nobody will like to construct a palace in the desert. A nation that destroys its soils destroys itself. Forests are the lungs of our land, purifying the air and giving fresh strength to our people, told by Franklin Roosevelt, the former president of USA. So conservation challenges and opportunities in the post-COVID-19 world. COVID-19 crisis can be ascribed to what we can say rooted in the disruption of the ecosystem, illegal wildlife trade, or race for global economic supremacy through some sort of biological warfare. Nobody is sure about it. But the problem is there. Even one small dot has power to stop the completion of a sentence. And here, not even dot, minuscule, which cannot be seen by our naked eyes. The microscopic organism, one only, has created havoc in the entire world. If we keep on disturbing the nature, we keep on, diminishing the biodiversity, species go on extinct, some other species will come, which we are not aware. As it is, our knowledge is limited to 12% of the life forms, and these may be much more dangerous. It will be difficult for us to handle. So, tiny invisible viruses, threat of extreme poverty and hunger, widening social inequality. It has triggered reverse migration and emerging social unrest. But there are pleasant surprises of this COVID crisis. As I told you, rivers are cleaner, air is cleaner, new shades of green, sky is real blue in cities, not seen like this for many years, witnessing twinkling of stars. Snow-clad mountains are visible from distant places. Peacocks, birds, chirping and increasing visibility of all forms of wildlife, even in cities, are the pleasant surprises. It only shows that if human beings don't interfere with the nature, it's such a wonderful place to live on. If we keep on interfering, then what we have seen, it's a COVID now, something else may come tomorrow. What are the lessons learned of this? The zoonotic diseases like Nipah, avian influenza, Zika, and coronavirus are linked to loss of biodiversity and forest. Illegal wildlife trade and wet wildlife market is the probable cause. Unsustainable extraction of natural resources, extreme anthropogenic pollution sources is disconnect with the nature, and it will prove disaster for the humanity. So what we need to relook the way we develop our cities, provide green spaces, which is happening in most of the new towns which are being set up now, the way we grow our food, the way we develop businesses, the way we respect and value nature, the way we conserve species, the way we degrade natural resources, the way we consume, the way we recycle waste, overall, the way inhabit and care for planet Earth. What I can do as an individual, that I do not contribute to the pollution. I do not contribute to the degradation of the nature. I will love wildlife. I will not allow others to harm nature. Whom do we please? To the policymakers, to the governments, to the business communities in all geographies, and fundamentally ourselves. So planet Earth is under repair. Mother Earth is under shutdown. So at least preserve whatever is left of the nature now. Let us not harm the existing, the last vestiges of the forest, because the plantations are no match to the natural forest. So these are the processes, these are the result of processes which have been going on for millions of years, and plantations of 10, 20, 50 or even 100 years are no match, because in a forest, lot of biodiversity is there. They are interconnected through a web, and if we disturb this web, it will be very, very difficult, not only difficult, but impossible to re-establish this web. Hence, protect wherever it is available, don't cause any harm to it, neither to plants nor to animal life, and plant trees wherever we can. That's the only way forward, and salute the Mother Earth. If we save the planet Earth, the greenery, the biodiversity, it will save us. Thank you.
Hello.
Are there any questions? If they are there, I am willing to respond.
Dr. T. Nagasai Kumar is asking what measures are required for controlling accidents that diminish environmental biodiversity. For example, steering gas leakage in Vizag, in a scenario where cities are expanding with respect to SDG.
Say what has happened in Vizag is a very, very unfortunate incident. But say increasing the greenery, had there been more of greenery, more of forests in that area, in and around, especially in the factory itself, that could have absorbed most of the gas. Probably there was not that kind of stipulation, and it's a man-made mistake. Say even this cushion will be serving purpose to a limited extent. It cannot absorb all the lethal gas emitted in a day or say few hours. So that's the challenge. So this kind of accidents cannot be taken care of. So it's a man-made mistake that man should have taken care. That has not happened. But biodiversity, if we grow more of trees, and then in fact Vizag area, a lot of biodiversity is available in and around the city itself, but we are going on destroying it in the name of development. So that has to be halted first of all. All the more need to preserve, protect whatever is left over, and try to increase the green cover wherever nothing is available. I thank the SVBR Women's College for organizing this national seminar involving the MCR HRD. I am thankful to you once again. Thank you.